All right, I think we can start if you're ready. So welcome everyone to our webinar, the LLM experiment, things you need to know. Today, we are diving into how large language models are transforming market research. We will explore the practical benefits they bring, because they do, the challenges of managing client expectations, maintaining transparency, and striking the right balance between AI tools and human expertise. Before we begin, a few housekeeping points to cover. After the discussion, we'll open the floor to 2 to 3 audience questions, which you can put into the Q&A section, and then we will wrap up. The recording will be shared with all the registered attendees, so if anyone couldn't make it today, then they will still have access to the full session. The webinar is hosted by Ruby Club. We are part of the data expert group, and we focus on innovation through the integration of diverse data sources like quantitative, qualitative, and global social listening. We have businesses focused on what truly matters by minimizing manual tasks. Now, let me introduce our panelists. First, we have Aksel Bedikyan, Vice President of Analytics at Leger, a leader in business intelligence, AI, and machine learning. He's helping companies make informed and data-driven decisions. And we have Illitch here, CEO and co-founder of Ruby Club, who brings over 20 years of experience in the market research industry, focusing on blending AI with human insights to push the boundaries of innovation. I'm Noemi Danko, Operations Director at Ruby Club, and I'll be your host today. Now let's get started. Large language models have made significant waves in our industry, and we are not here to debate whether they should be used. They are already part of our work. Can you please each share a concrete example of how they positively disrupted or benefited your work? Maybe Aksel, you can start, and then we will move forward to Illitch's response.
Absolutely, Noemi. Thank you. And hi, everyone. A pleasure to be here with you today. Looking forward to spending the next half an hour together. So basically, the way we've made use of large language models at Leger has been pretty much twofold. The first one is mostly related to productivity and efficiency. So how do we remove some of the redundancies? How do we remove some of the voluminous work that we do through the use of LLMs? And typically, it's within the context of like using it as an assistant, right? So we use it to summarize large volumes of text. We'll use it to come up with the first version of a discussion guide or a questionnaire, synthesized through data and so on and so forth. So kind of like an assistant would be the way we would use it. And it has sped up a lot of our internal processes as well. The second piece is more about analysis. So sometimes this analysis is internal to us and sometimes it's client facing. So typically we will use it to be able to talk to our data, to be able to come up with our storytelling, to be able to do some sort of analysis that we otherwise probably wouldn't have thought about doing, or generate some insights that would have gone missing. That's the first piece. And the second piece from an analysis standpoint is offering, and I'll talk more about this a bit later, but offering to our clients the ability to be able to talk to their data as well, right? So this is more of a client-facing product initiatives that we're working on right now. So that will be it. Basically, it's about productivity and efficiency, but also from a product and related to generation of insights.
Yeah, thank you, Aksel. Illitch?
Yeah, so yes. Yeah, very similar. So if I think in terms of sequence, we very often use it at the beginning of a process. So as a first draft, as part of a brainstorming type of session, as a way to approach problem solving. So, we can throw some hypotheses on the table, and then, we can use it to look at different perspectives, different ways of organizing a task or approaching a problem. The middle part, we don't necessarily go and use it that much, but where I really see it as being a very useful tool in our toolkit is to come at the end of the process and to sort of criticize, review the work that you've done. Sometimes I think of LLM as this very sensible, slightly annoying friend who will always be very measured in its judgment. And I wouldn't necessarily trust an LLM to conduct a task, but they will very often come up with some very good point to criticize your work. And like us, we always love criticizing other people's work. That's much easier than doing the work. And LLMs tends to have a similar type of behavior. It's also very good at finding blind spots, sort of biases, like confirmation, validation biases, but we all tend to do. So to give this sense of, again, like this sensible friend who can sort of keep a sense of measure and perspective before you come to your conclusions. And then you've got the whole aspect of, on a personal level, I almost stopped using Google, to do some initial type of desk research and trying to understand like a complicated type of topics. Like, we in our industry, we end up dealing with all sorts of topics. And of course, we're not specialists of everything. So that's like generally a good place to start identifying what's the best way to learn about something. Not necessarily to do the learning, but just to give you like a roadmap to go from A to B.
Yeah, thank you, Illitch. So while we know LLMs can be incredibly useful, like especially in speeding up repetitive processes and tasks that you just mentioned, we also need to recognize that they are not always reliable. So maybe let's talk about this a little bit, because communicating these limitations to clients can be tricky, especially when expectations are high. So how can researchers, for example, effectively communicate the limitations of LLMs to clients who may have inflated expectations? What do you think, Illitch? Let's start with you this time.
Sure. Yeah, so it reminds me a lot when online research really started to be not the norm, but like take over some of the face-to-face and even telephone catchy type of work. The expectation was sort of inflated. You had suddenly to be able to do much more for much less in terms of volume and in terms of pricing. I think for, like from the early, let's say the mid 2000 to early 2020, it's been like a continuous race to the bottom in terms of price and almost negatively in terms of quality as well, even though, of course, you've got some exceptions and islands of quality in the panel world in the industry, and by large this has been a big problem. So I think that's a real challenge for us to be able to communicate this clearly to clients. Like a lot of AI infused type of platforms and tools are it's not just a push of a button type of process. It's a bit like in creative work, like you don't pay just for what the person can do, you pay for all the training and learning that happened beforehand. Like I try not to do too many plugs for our tool, but for example, in our environment, when we work with like large volume of data, like tens, 100,000 even of articles and documents, etc. The whole of the work happens pre-AI and pre-large language model type of involvement in the task. Like all the pre-processing, all the tagging, all the preparation of the data is being done using traditional market research tools, statistical tools. Like if not for like the advent of AI and large language model, like clients would expect to pay for this. So understanding that this is not just like sending throwing like a lot of data to ChatGPT and just clicking a button. There's like much more behind it.
Yeah, thank you. Aksel, what do you think?
Yeah, agreed with all of that. I guess I would start off by saying that the best way to communicate it to clients is from the start, right? What you don't want is start a project, deliver your stuff, and then you get challenged by a client on the limitations. And then you're like, yeah, it's true that it has ABC limitations. The best thing to do is to start with those limitations so that you're managing expectations. Illitch alluded to it a bit earlier, expectations have been shifted, right? So clients expect things that are faster, that are better, that are cheaper. Why? Because LLMs exist now. So that's the first one. But before you communicate anything, you need to be aware of it, right? Like before you understand where a problem may lie, you need to know that the problem is there. And to get to that, my suggestion and recommendation has always been use it, right? Use it in any way that you can possibly think of using it. And just by making use of a tool, that's where you're going to come up with a better understanding of where the tool shines and where the tool doesn't. And where the tool doesn't shine is, in fact, not only a challenge that needs to be communicated, but also an opportunity for you to bring in your competence and your abilities to be able to resolve that. Sometimes it's as simple as like, feature prompt engineering. Everybody talks about prompt engineering. But sometimes it's more complicated than that. Sometimes it requires custom approaches, custom code, custom products, right? And that's where you're bringing in your expertise. The thought of just throwing a bunch of data at a large language model, let's say ChatGPT, for instance, might work in certain ways, but it doesn't in all ways. And I think as clients are getting more and more mature in the way they're using it, the more they're understanding the power of it, but also the very challenges and the issues that lie with it.
And
Yeah.
if I may just add that, but all of this, I completely agree. And the difficulty is, and things are shifting a little bit, but if I look maybe like a year back and from the feedback, interacting with clients and going to conferences and similar type of webinars, there was a very big emotional charge attached to the use of AI and LLM in the, like, who is this going to take our jobs basically, and then like all the variation of the theme around this. What I'm still sensing is that the topic is still a bit partisan, in the sense that it's hard to have a very nuanced conversation around it. And you have like the camp of, oh, this is what this is all about. Like, let's go for the technology kind of adopters, early adopters. And those who like, oh, this will never be able to replace me type of approach. And more like defensive, like I don't care, will always be needed. And I think both points are true and need to coexist. And hopefully the session we're having today is a step in that sense. Like, it's not about being pro or against. It's about being a bit more nuanced about its application, and even in our conversations with clients in that sense.
Yeah, definitely. So as LLMs become more integrated into market research, there is also a growing concern about AI washing. I think it's crucial for the industry to stay transparent and ensure clients are not misled. So in what ways could AI washing in market research mislead clients, and how can the industry maintain transparency and integrity? What do you think, Aksel?
So it's everywhere, right? Compared to what it was, let's say maybe 5 years ago or even 3 years ago, look at your LinkedIn feed. My LinkedIn feed is maybe 50% related to AI. AI this, AI that. I get asked the question, but do you do AI? And I'm often, I feel so, it's a bizarre emotion that I feel when I get asked that question, because I don't know how to answer that. The answer is yes, but I don't know how to get to it, because I'm not sure the person that's asking me the question really understands what the question is or where it's coming from. So the AI washing is a real thing. We're throwing the term around everywhere. Sometimes we're overrepresenting what it's able to do. Not putting enough light onto the risks and challenges that are associated to it. Like, for example, we were talking about limitations earlier, right? Our experiences show that sometimes these models get lazy. You feed it 1 or 2 files, ask it to analyze, summarize. It does a pretty decent job, and then you can work with it. Do it with 15 files or 30 files, and you start understanding that it's not looking at all the information. It's not reading everything, right? That's basically one of it. Scaling, right? When you're in a market research industry and your clients have vast amounts of data, and it's not a specific point in time that they need something, but there's data from different sources, there's multiple amounts of data, and how do you use it in a way to scale it? That becomes a challenge as well, right? So that's something that we need to keep our mind on, that, you know, off-the-shelf products oftentimes cannot do the depth and the volume of stuff that we needed to do. And that also needs to be made super clear to our clients as well. And the other part, I guess, is about like black box algorithms. Like sometimes we're like, oh, we built a model and it does this. And like, well, can you explain what it is and how it's built and so on and so forth? And when we can't, and it becomes opaque, it becomes a little bit more difficult to be able to kind of like really position the model and the tool and the technology as a value-added, business-oriented tool that helps us make better decisions at the end of the day. That's all we're trying to do, right? How do we use data and insights to be able to make better business decisions?
Yeah.
Yeah, to continue on your lazy comment. So first of all, it's both fascinating and scary that we can give attributes like lazy to a piece of technology. But I'll give two more. So especially earlier models, and now it's not so true, but you could say that they were like lazy liars that can do maths, you know, and you know, like they will hallucinate at times, and they will also have variable performance on maths. So sometimes they will be able to do fairly complex type of calculations or statistical type of work, but sometimes they will trip up at very like much more basic type of calculations, which make it really hard. You know, if you deal with someone, you know up to what point the person can handle like a complex task. But if you have a tool that will do difficult things without any problem, but then completely trip up on easier tasks, it's hard to know when you can really rely on the tool. So to be fair, new models are starting to be much better at counting. So we're still not there, but much better, which, you know, in the work that we do is really key. I just want to name drop, here in the UK, we had someone from the industry called Alexandra Kuzmina from MMR, who was really vocal about this AI washing like 12 months, 18 months ago. And this really resonated because I think now as a group of peers, as an industry, we're a bit more mindful about, you know, not jumping on this AI washing train, and all a bit more suspicious when we go to a conference and we see a stand where it's just like fluff and no real substance behind the tech. So like we are getting better at it, but we shall remain on the watch. And just a final point. So, you know, Aksel, you mentioned that you need to know its limitation, and I think there's always like this trade-off. Like at times it can be useful to get 60% or 70% of the quality with 10% of the effort. It depends where you put this in the cycle, in your research cycle, and maybe like at the early stages, for example, at the brainstorming more type of creating creative problem solving type of part of the process. Like 10% of the effort and 70% of the output in terms of quality sounds like a great deal. Like, why would you not do that? But certainly not when you want to deliver work like at the highest possible standard. So be mindful of the trade-off.
Yeah, that's right. Now there is another hype that has been going around for a couple of months now, which is synthetic data. So with the help of large language models too, we have the ability to create almost endless survey responses. So we might have to rethink some of the traditional methods that we know. So in this new landscape, how do we redefine the concept of sample size or data saturations? And if LLM become adept at predicting human behavior, what do you think? Could they make traditional market research obsolete? Illitch, let's start with you.
Sure. So yeah, for sure, it's increasingly part of the conversation. So I think it's also the result of, like, for years, we've had this conversation around this race to the bottom with quality from, again, not all, because some are really making a conscious effort to focus on quality, but the overall panel landscape has had massive quality challenges, like, and this is a non-fact in the industry. And this is coming as a way to not mitigate the problem, but to come with like a different source of truth in your analysis. And like, if you can compare different sources of truth in your data mix, but and if they all point towards the same direction, like, you can have a bit more confidence in presenting your findings to your client. This is why we combine quant and qual research, etc., to be able to get some validation across different sources of truth. So that will definitely help in that sense. And that said, I don't think like traditional, even face-to-face in-person research is going anywhere. Even through like the advent of online research, like face-to-face still remain very strong and sort of steady almost in the last 20 years or so. And it will remain there, but the human interactions will remain largely unchanged, but the way we will analyze data afterward will change a lot. So they will coexist.
Yeah, Aksel, what's your take on this?
So there's a lot of talk about synthetic data and the ability to generate sample without necessarily talking to real people. The benefit is pretty clear, right? Like, if we're able to access that technology, suddenly timing gets improved, costing potentially gets improved. The big challenge, of course, is how effective are these, synthetic panels and synthetic data? Are they representative of the very population that you're trying to reach and trying to ask questions to? The jury is still, well, maybe the jury's not out, but I haven't seen anything right now that gives me a lot of confidence, as a market researcher. But we're constantly looking at it, and I think it's just a matter of time before we get there. But I would urge people to, whenever they're confronted with this, to really like lift the hood and understand, how is this thing created? Like, what was the training set for this? Are there any biases involved? Like, how effective is this? You can test it, right? You can grab two different sets of sample. One is synthetic, one is real, and then you can try and understand what the differences are. I think the key to like kind of get better at this is the key to everything. Just practice and get your hands dirty and like roll up the sleeves and try stuff, If you just go on hearsay and what other people are doing, it's good, but it might not be applicable to you. You haven't really absorbed the learnings. Like, I encourage everybody to kind of like get messy with data. And learn for themselves, right? And everybody's going to learn something else, something different, based on your function, based on your category, based on your level of, expertise and capabilities and skill set. But doing it at your level, wherever that might be, is going to generate learnings that are probably very specific to you, but also that might be applicable. So it also puts you in a position of strength as opposed to a position of, well, okay, this is what's being said, so let me go with it with my eyes closed.
Yeah. And then we can circulate back to client expectations and validation and quality and so on. But now let's look at the future. So we talked about the new models that are being released nowadays. New ones are being tested as well. And we can already see that they are improving. So maybe in a couple of months, we can talk about this topic again, taking into consideration all the new models and features that we will have. So what do you think? What radical changes in client expectations do you foresee as the new models become more and more integrated into market research processes?
So I haven't had any clients ask this, but we're anticipating this. So you know how like we went from static reporting, we went into dashboarding and visualizations, and then from there we went into interactive reports and interactive dashboards where you're able to, change filters and things update, and it becomes, it becomes more interactive, as the name would suggest. I think we're going to a place now where we're going to have analysis and data, and over and above potentially report in a dashboard and what have you, we're going to a place where we want to talk to the data. We want to ask the data questions, and we want to make hypothetical scenarios and situations and say, what is the outcome of this? If we did this, what would happen to that type of thing, right? Like more in terms of like predictive and maybe even prescriptive. That could also be in a very closed, static sense where there is one set of data. But as you can imagine, clients have different data sources, and even within a data source, vast amounts of information. So eventually, we should probably also go into a place where you can imagine a repository of data and reports and you can interact with, and not just one, right? So imagine if you have like a tracker over 5 years. It's one thing to say, okay, well, last year's tracker, what happened, and give me the insights and blah, 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 ask it the questions, but you can also start asking questions if you were to load it with the historical data. What are the longitudinal patterns of XYZ? What would happen if we were to do blah, blah, blah? What is the difference, and what is the evolution of whatever it might be, right? So you're actually in a situation where you don't have just a static report, but you're interacting with a wide range array of data over time. That's where I see us going with this.
Yeah. I think that's a perfect way to conclude this question, because this is exactly what we are building actually at Rubik Lab. Like this idea of bringing different type of data under one roof, and to be able to have this very, I was going to say, intimate relationship with the data, like to be able to challenge it, to validate thinking, to be curious, and to explore across the whole variety of data set. So yeah, perfect description, Aksel. Thank you.
Thank you. So I think we have time for one question from the audience, if there is anyone who wants to ask a question, and then we can finish the webinar. Okay, so in a crowded field, it's important to differentiate real AI-driven insights from those that just use AI as a marketing buzzword. We talked about AI washing and so on. So what do you think, what strategies can market research firms employ to differentiate genuine AI-driven analysis from superficial LLM applications?
I can take a shot at this. I think it starts with the talent, right? Like, who do you have in your organization, right? Do you have people who are able to source the data? Do you have people that are able to process, cleanse, and go through the data transformations that need to happen in the background, right? Before you sink your teeth into data and like build a model around it. Illitch was talking about it earlier. It's oftentimes like not the most glorious part of the job, but it's probably the most important part of the job, because if you're working with faulty, biased, incomplete data set, well, obviously, you can imagine the output that comes from that. So I think once you have the proper talent in place, things will open up, right? Like as you go through the different opportunities, different clients, different data sets, things are just going to start appearing. I don't think I'm in a position to say, well, this is the strategy that you should play. Well, I don't know your situation, right? Like I don't know the company you're in. I don't know the geography, the business you're at. And so the most I guess, encompassing and applicable answer I could possibly give you is it starts with your talent. Like you got to get the right people through the door so that you can start strategizing and seeing what the best path forward would be.
Yeah, that's right. All right, so thank you, Aksel. Thank you, Illitch, and thank you all for joining us today. I hope you found the discussion valuable. As I mentioned at the beginning of the webinar, we'll be sharing the recording with all the registered attendees, and also stay tuned, and because we will soon be opening the registration for our next webinar, where we will showcase one of our tools that Rubik Lab team has developed during the past couple of months. So it will be a very interesting one, and we look forward to seeing you there as well.
All right. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank
Have a
you,
good day.
everyone.
Cheers.
Bye.
Bye.